April 12, 1861. A cannonball shatters the serenity of Fort Sumter, South Carolina, marking the beginning of the bloodiest conflict in American history. Over the next 4 years, the Civil War would tear the nation apart, leaving over 600,000 dead and a legacy of bitterness that would endure for generations. The American Civil War was a complex and multifaceted conflict, with its roots embedded in the nation's founding. The issue of slavery had divided the country for decades, and the election of Abraham Lincoln, a staunch opponent of slavery, in 1860 proved to be the final straw. In December 1860, South Carolina seceded from the Union, and by February 1861, 6 other Southern states had followed suit. On February 4, 1861, the Confederate States of America was formed, with Jefferson Davis as its president. Key figures: Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Lincoln led the Union to victory in the Civil War. He is considered one of the greatest presidents in American history. Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederate States of America. Davis was a staunch defender of slavery. He was captured by Union forces at the end of the war and imprisoned for 2 years. Ulysses S. Grant, a Union general. Grant was appointed commander of all Union armies in 1864. He led the Union to victory in the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse, which effectively ended the war. Robert E. Lee, a Confederate general. Lee was considered one of the greatest military commanders in American history. He surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, ending the Civil War. Important battles. First Battle of Bull Run, the first major battle of the Civil War. Bull Run resulted in a Confederate victory. It showed that the war would be long and bloody. Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. Antietam resulted in a draw. It was a turning point in the war, as it forced the Confederate Army to abandon its invasion of the North. Battle of Gettysburg, considered the turning point of the Civil War. Gettysburg was a major Union victory. It marked the end of the Confederate Army's invasion of the North and led to Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. Battle of Vicksburg, a Union victory. Vicksburg gave the Union control of the Mississippi River and split the Confederacy in two. Battle of Appomattox Courthouse, the final major battle of the Civil War. Appomattox Courthouse resulted in Lee's surrender to Grant. It effectively ended the Civil War. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter, South Carolina. The Union responded by mobilizing its army and navy. In the early months of the war, the Confederates won a series of victories, including the First Battle of Bull Run. However, the Union soon gained the upper hand, thanks to its superior industrial base and manpower. In 1862, the Union launched a series of offensives in the East and West. In the East, General George B. McClellan was tasked with capturing the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. However, McClellan was slow and indecisive, and his campaigns ended in failure. In the West, General Ulysses S. Grant won a series of victories, including the capture of the Confederate stronghold of Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. In 1863, the Union launched a decisive offensive in both the East and West. In the East, General Robert E. Lee invaded Pennsylvania in an attempt to force the Union to negotiate a peace settlement. However, Lee was defeated by General George Meade at the Battle of Gettysburg. In the West, Grant captured the Confederate city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, giving the Union control of the Mississippi River and splitting the Confederacy in two. In 1864, Grant was appointed commander of all Union armies. He launched a coordinated offensive against the Confederacy, with General William T. Sherman leading a march through Georgia and the Carolinas. Lee tried to defend Richmond, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. On April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. This effectively ended the Civil War. The Civil War was a watershed moment in American history. It ended slavery, preserved the Union, and laid the foundation for the modern United States. However, the war also had a devastating impact on the country, leaving a legacy of bitterness and division that continues to this day. The Civil War was fought by ordinary Americans, on both sides, who were willing to sacrifice their lives for what they believed in. The stories of these soldiers are the heart of the Civil War story. They are stories of courage, sacrifice, and determination. One such story is the story of Private Henry Lawson Wyatt, a Union soldier from Indiana. Wyatt was just 18 years old when he enlisted in the Army in 1861. He fought in several major battles, including Gettysburg and Vicksburg. In 1864, Wyatt was captured by Confederate forces and imprisoned in Andersonville Prison, Georgia. Andersonville Prison was a notorious hellhole, where thousands of Union prisoners died from disease, malnutrition, and overcrowding. Wyatt survived Andersonville, but he was never the same. He was haunted by the horrors he had seen and experienced. After the war, Wyatt returned to Indiana and tried to rebuild his life. However, he was never able to fully escape the trauma of his experiences in Andersonville. Wyatt's story is just one of many that illustrate the human cost of the Civil War. The war left a deep scar on the American psyche, and its legacy continues to be felt today. Imagine yourself standing on the battlefield at Gettysburg on July 3, 1863. The air is thick with smoke and the sound of artillery fire. You can see the Confederate lines on the opposite hill, and you know that a major attack is imminent. You are part of the Union Army, and you are scared. But you are also determined to defend your country. You raise your rifle and prepare to fire. Suddenly, the Confederates charge. The two armies meet in a clash of steel and flesh. You fire your rifle again and again. You see men fall all around you, but you keep fighting. Finally, the Confederate attack is repulsed. You and your fellow soldiers have survived, but the battle has taken a heavy toll. You are exhausted and shaken, but you are also filled with pride. You have helped to preserve the Union and end slavery. The Civil War was a brutal and bloody conflict, but it was also a defining moment in American history. It is a story that should never be forgotten. Now imagine yourself standing in the trenches outside Petersburg, Virginia, in the spring of 1865. You are part of the Union Army, and you have been fighting the Confederates for nearly 4 years. The trenches are muddy and overcrowded. You are exhausted and hungry, but you are also determined to see the war through to the end. One day, the Confederates launch a major attack on your trenches. You fire your rifle and throw grenades, but the Confederates are overwhelming. They break through your lines and force you to retreat. You and your fellow soldiers are running for your lives. You can hear the sound of Confederate soldiers behind you, shouting and firing their rifles. You finally reach the safety of the Union lines, but you know that the war is not over yet. You are determined to fight on until the Confederacy is defeated and freedom is won for all Americans. The Civil War was a war of attrition, where both sides suffered heavy casualties. It was a war that tested the limits of human endurance and resolve. But in the end, the Union emerged victorious, and the promise of freedom was realized for all Americans. The Civil War was a defining moment in American history, and its legacy continues to shape the country today. It is a story that should never be forgotten. The Civil War was a complex and multifaceted conflict, but it was also a human drama on a grand scale. The stories of the soldiers who fought in the war are the heart of the Civil War story. They are stories of courage, sacrifice, and determination. The Civil War was a watershed moment in American history, and its legacy continues to be felt today. It is a story that should never be forgotten.